Step away from the vegetables, sir. Put the crate on the ground, and keep your hands where I can see them. That is a real sentence. That was said to me, in my own driveway, while I was holding 20 pounds of heirloom acorn squash like some kind of suburban Pablo Escobar of produce. And I swear to you, for half a second, I actually considered whether zucchini counts as a concealed weapon. It was 9:15 p.m. on a humid July Tuesday, the kind of night where the air feels thick enough to chew. Red and blue lights were splashing across my vinyl siding, turning my carefully weeded flower beds into what looked like a low-budget episode of CSI, Cul-de-sac. I stood there blinking at Officer Miller, young guy, jawline sharp enough to slice a tomato, hand hovering near his belt like my squash might suddenly lunge at him. "Sir," he said, tired already, "we received a report of illicit commercial activity. Unauthorized distribution of goods." I looked down at the crate in my hands. "It's squash," I told him. "Heirloom. Nutty flavor profile. Roasts beautifully with brown sugar. It is not a weapon." He didn't laugh, but he did sigh, and I knew exactly who had called. Across the street, behind twitching blinds and a lawn so aggressively green it looked chemically enhanced, lived Brenda, self-appointed guardian of property values, sworn enemy of dandelions, and apparently now the DEA of zucchini. She wasn't technically the president of an HOA, we didn't have one, but that had never stopped her from acting like Supreme Court Justice of lawn compliance. Miller followed me around back after I begged him to just look. I flipped on the floodlights. He stopped dead. "Mother of God," he whispered. It was a lot. When I bought the house 3 years earlier, I'd been a burned-out software engineer looking for something real. I wanted to touch grass, literally. I built a couple raised beds, planted 3 zucchini seeds. That's it. Turns out my superpower isn't coding, it's botanical domination. Tomatoes climbing 8 feet high, kale that looked like it could mug you in a dark alley, pumpkin vines strangling patio furniture. I had created a full-blown calorie factory. If I didn't harvest zucchini every 6 hours, they grew to baseball bat proportions. I had 400 pounds of tomatoes. I was drowning in vitamins. "I can't eat it all," I told him. "I'm a single man. There are limits to human kale consumption." Miller finally cracked a smile. But then he gave me the bad news. Technically, distributing this much produce, even for free, counted as commercial activity. Traffic hazard. Market disruption. Undermining local businesses. Translation: Brenda had weaponized zoning law. The next morning, code enforcement showed up with a tape measure and the dead eyes of a man who enjoys paperwork. By noon, I had a neon orange cease and desist taped to my front door. 48 hours to stop cultivation and distribution, or $5,000 a day. Stop cultivation. They wanted me to kill the garden. I went to City Hall. 3 hours of floor wax, despair, and a woman named Dolores who called me the Zucchini Man. Apparently, if I sold the produce, I was illegal. If I gave it away, I was predatory pricing. If I donated it, the tax deduction counted as commercial benefit. The only legal option was to let it rot. That night, I harvested 500 pounds of food like a man possessed and drove it to a shelter downtown. Marcus ran the place, big guy, linebacker build, heart of gold buried under layers of sarcasm. We formed a bucket brigade. Fresh tomatoes, peppers, kale. 200 people ate that week. It felt good. Not just spite good. Real good. But the next morning, another violation notice. Because the potential tax write-off meant I was deriving financial benefit. That's when something inside me snapped. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just a quiet little twig crack of clarity. If the law said feeding people was commercial, then fine, I wouldn't be commercial. I'd be religious. I found the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, RLUIPA. Zoning laws cannot substantially burden religious exercise without compelling government interest. And I thought, if wine can be blood and bread can be body, why can't zucchini be sacrament? I called Tony, my contractor. "I need a gazebo," I told him. "But holier." He charged me triple for religious craziness. By the next afternoon, right in the center of my lawn, perfectly visible from Brenda's kitchen window, stood a cedar tabernacle with a copper finial and reinforced shelving for holy squash. I wrote bylaws. The order of the perpetual harvest. To hoard zucchini is sin. To give zucchini is grace. Services whenever the harvest is ready. Sunday morning, I put on a maroon bathrobe, grabbed a garden hoe like a shepherd's staff, and welcomed 12 shelter residents as my first congregation. We sat in a semicircle on the grass. I held up a cucumber like Simba on Pride Rock. The earth asks for no Visa card, I proclaimed. It only asks that you eat it before it gets soft. They laughed. Then they filled grocery bags with sacrament. And right on cue, sirens. 2 cruisers. Code enforcement SUV. Brenda practically foaming. Sergeant Kowalski stepped out like a fire hydrant with authority issues. Step away from the vegetable stand. This, I announced, robe billowing dramatically, is a sacred liturgy. They tried to arrest me. But then Marcus stepped forward. Then Big Mike. Then Earl. A wall of people holding pumpkins. You arrest him, Marcus said calmly. You arrest all of us. We are accomplices in the great salad. And that's when the twist hit. Not legal, not theatrical, human. The optics. Neighbors were filming. TikTok was being born in real time. Kowalski lowered his cuffs. Take it to court, he muttered. So we did. City Hall hearing. Packed chamber. Brenda's beige coalition on one side, my congregation on the other. The city attorney called it a farce. I dumped a bag of rotted zucchini slime on the defense table. This, I said, is what compliance looks like. The judge stared at the mush. Then at the city attorney. Is the city arguing, she asked slowly, that it is better for food to rot than to be eaten? Silence. Temporary injunction granted. Seasonal exemption, expanded from Christmas trees to squash mass. No chanting after 8 p.m. We walked out to applause. The tabernacle stood for 3 years. We fed thousands of pounds of food. Eventually, the city quietly amended the ordinance to allow community gardens, mostly to avoid dealing with me again. And Brenda? She moved to a condo on the 40th floor. I hear she's lobbying to ban balcony herbs. Here's the thing I learned, and it wasn't about zucchini. Power rarely announces itself as cruelty. It calls itself compliance. Standards. Property values. It wraps selfishness in policy and tells you waste is order. But sometimes the system only changes when someone makes it ridiculous enough to expose the absurdity. I didn't start a church because I believed vegetables were divine. I started it because compassion shouldn't require a permit. And maybe that's the uncomfortable question here, when the law and common sense part ways which one deserves obedience. If feeding people violates policy, is the problem the feeder, or the policy? I'd love to hear what you think. Where's the line between civil disobedience and chaos? Between protecting neighborhoods and protecting humanity? Have you ever had to push back against a rule that just didn't sit right in your gut? Drop your thoughts. Share your story. And if you ever find yourself surrounded by cops holding squash, just remember, God don't need a permit.